The president of Azerbaijan is grateful to the international community for considering his country to host the COP29. It's as a result of one of its efforts to cap greenhouse gases. And this has been incredible milestone by his country. HICGI news agency, it will still be bringing you of what is transpiring in Azerbaijan at the stadium here where 70,000 people can be accommodated. We're expecting, of course, heads of state. We're expecting so many stakeholders for the convention that is beginning on 11th to 22nd November 2024. My name is Kivumbi Earnest Benjamin. HICGI News Agency is privileged to be covering a special presidential meeting on measuring the grain wealth of Africa. This is happening on the sidelines of the world heads of state who are convening at the COP29 here in Azerbaijan, where HICGI News Agency is privileged to be covering this session. At COP29 here in Baku, Azerbaijan, under the leadership of His Excellency Denis Nguesso, the President of the Republic of Congo, His Excellency Dr. William Ruto, the President of the Republic of Kenya, and the Chairperson of the African Union Committee of the Heads of State on Climate Change, and Dr. Akinwumi is the president of the African Development Bank Group. I will hosting a dialogue of the heads of state and of government during the World Leaders segment of the COP29 on measuring the wealth of Africa, the green wealth of Africa. The rationale is that the African leaders in Nairobi Declaration on climate change and the call to action highlights the need to review the gross domestic product, GDP, of the Africa through a proper valuation of this abundant natural capital that is measuring the ecosystem of services, including the vast forests that sequester the carbon to unlock the new sources of wealth for Africa. Africa's abundant natural resources provide essential environmental services to the world, accounting approximately 26% of all the carbon sequestration in the forest worldwide. Yet this global public good remains largely unaccounted for as the ecosystem services, including the action as an ecosystem of the forests that are captured in the standard measures of the economic activities of Africa's GDP that's not accounted for. The proper valuation and monetization of the carbon sequestration of the forests of the ecosystems will create a positive and compelling incentives for countries to invest in forest preservation and sustainable logging, a key role in the climate adaptation and mitigation of the green transition. So the expected outcome is going to be the Africa heads of state and government to issue a joint statement on measuring the green wealth of Africa. HICGI News Agency is going to bring you what the discussions and the dialogue happening at the presidential meeting of African heads of state on green wealth. My name is Kivumbi Earnest Benjamin in Baku, Azerbaijan.
Sorry.
Excusez-moi, hein? C'est pour mettre dans la liste.
J'attends au cas là un dernier truc là.
President William Samoei Ruto. His Excellency Mr. Paul Kagame, President of the Republic of Rwanda. His Excellency Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa, President of Zimbabwe. His Excellency Mr. Pharaoh Essozima Nasige, President of the Republic of Togo. His Excellency Mr. Nana Akufo-Addo, President of the Republic of Ghana. His Excellency Mr. Patrice Trovoada, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Sao Tome and Principe. His Excellency Mr. Tiémoko Meyliet Koné, Vice President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire. His Excellency Mr. Ahmed Afif, Vice President of the Republic of Seychelles. His Excellency Mr. Philip Isidore Mpando, Vice President of the United Republic of Tanzania. His Excellency Mr. Jeremiah Koné, Vice President of the Republic of Liberia. Her Excellency Mrs. Judith Tuluka Sumiwa, Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo. His Excellency Harry Pierre, Minister of Environmental Protection, of Nature and Sustainable Development, Republic of Cameroon. His Excellency Simeon Oyono Esono Angwe, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Equatorial Guinea. Her Excellency Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, the Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO. And Professor Patrick Mekudi, the CEO, Global Center on Adaptation. Excellencies, Head of State, Honorable Ministers, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to welcome you this afternoon to this very important presidential meeting here in the beautiful city of Baku, Azerbaijan, during this COP29 on the theme of measuring the green wealth of Africa. My name is Victor Oladipo, and my role is very simple this afternoon, and that's to provide a very brief overview and a synopsis of the run-up show during this program this morning. Just before we commence, I'd like to let you know that there is translation services in multiple languages, of course in English, French, Portuguese, Spanish, Arabic, and I think that covers pretty much the list. There are a few translation glitches that are being fixed, so just in case you're putting on your headpiece and it doesn't seem to be working, just know that you're not alone, but it should be fixed within the next few moments. So kindly bear with us. We should have it fixed momentarily. The team is working very fast and furious on that, and if I could see a show of hands from the back, just to indicate that that's been done. Do we have a fix in the back? Are we good? I'm assuming that's the case. Well, Your Excellencies, there are really countless simultaneous meetings holding this afternoon at COP29, but you have graciously committed effort, time, resources, and political will to be here this morning to discuss what is one of the most important issues of our time, shaping or reshaping the narrative around the reassessment and reevaluation of the true value of Africa's green wealth in a continent that is stupendously wealthy, stupendously blessed with abundant and critically needed resources that will have an impact on our world in the 21st century and well beyond. As heads of state, your presence here, Your Excellencies, is proof positive that Africa is serious about leveraging its place and its resources within the context of a global economy. Shortly, His Excellency President Sassou Nguesso, the convener and co-chair of this meeting, will provide introductory remarks and later welcome his fellow heads of state or their representatives to provide short statements. He will be leaving at a particular point in the program, and I gather he'll be handing over the baton to His Excellency President Faure to take over thereafter. As well, we'll have an opportunity to hear from the co-chair of this meeting, the President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. Our meeting this afternoon will end with a consideration of a joint COP29 statement. Your Excellencies, our convener and President of the Republic of Congo, His Excellency Denis Sassou Nguesso, is an exceptional leader whose commitment to Africa's environmental future has been steadfast and rock solid. President Nguesso, thank you for your unwavering dedication to Africa's sustainable future and legacy. Please, the floor is yours, Your Excellency. Okay, I gather that we are working fast and furious to fix our technical hitch. I do have a signal from the back. Javier, am I to assume that we need about a minute? Okay, 5 minutes. Well, that's a lot of time to fill. Well, since time is of the essence and since there are quite a number of other meetings this morning, we're going to ask that each of our speakers be brief, straight to the point. As the saying goes, brevity really is the spice of life. But this meeting today is probably, to my mind, one of the most exciting and one of the most important for us as a continent. For way too long, Africa has been told that it is poor, and that is pretty much a paradox given the wealth beneath our soil. This meeting today really is a game changer for us. It's the beginning of many conversations moving forward that will help us as a continent reshape the narrative about the true nature and the true value of the wealth that we do possess in a global economy that depends almost entirely on our green wealth and our green resources. Your Excellencies, your role in advancing this, and many of you have already taken a leadership role over the last few years in advancing this cause. But we believe that from here, particularly given the signing of the co-statement at the end of this, we will begin to set the trail for even greater things to come. I see again, and I want to acknowledge President Kagame, as well as President Ruto and President Nguesso, who have been steadfast in pushing for a reshaping of our narrative in this regard. And I want to salute you, Your Excellencies, for the very pivotal and strategic role that you're playing in this regard. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, if you be kind enough, please acknowledge them with a round of applause. Again, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, kindly bear with us. I do know that the team is working fast and furious to fix the technical problem in the back, and I do expect that shortly, with much hope and with much faith in the team, receive the green light to proceed with the rest of the meeting. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, President Sassou.
vous nous dit qu'il y a des problèmes de traduction simultanée. Alors, je demande à tous les amis de tout faire pour me comprendre en français. Tout le monde fait l'effort de comprendre ce que je veux dire en français, jusqu'à ce que les techniciens nous permettent d'avoir la traduction simultanée. Madame et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Président du groupe de la Banque africaine de développement, Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi de saluer votre présence à cette importante réunion de haut niveau sur la comptabilisation du capital naturel et la réévaluation de la richesse verte de nos pays. Émanation de l'Union africaine et club des 12 à l'origine, notre groupe qui comprend l'ensemble des pays ici représentés s'est mué en club des 15 en charge de diriger la recherche et le plaidoyer sur la valorisation du capital naturel de l'Afrique et de son potentiel dans l'appréciation des richesses de nos nations. Je note avec un grand intérêt la haute portée du thème de la présente rencontre, expression partagée de notre volonté légitime au service d'une vision ambitieuse, à savoir mesurer la richesse verte des nations, capital naturel et productivité économique en Afrique. Soulignons que le capital naturel est une source de croissance économique par les matières premières et les services écosystémiques qu'il fournit. Fort heureusement, fort malheureusement, le produit intérieur brut, PIB en cycle, en tant que principal indicateur de nos économies, ne donne aucun élément sur l'apport de nos ressources naturelles à la richesse de nos pays en dépit de leur abondance. C'est en cela que la 37e session ordinaire de la conférence des chefs d'État et de gouvernement de l'Union africaine a mis l'accent en février 2024 sur la nécessité d'intégrer le capital naturel et les services y attenants dans l'évaluation du PIB. 8 objectifs sont assignés à la présente table ronde, à savoir 1. Discuter de la justification de la réévaluation de la taille
value of Africa's natural assets, such as the Congo Basin, which absorbs over 1.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide annually. Africa is one of the richest continents in terms of ecosystem services, yet we remain nature rich but cash poor. By properly valuing our green wealth, we can unlock new financial flows to green investments, bolster our economies, and even improve our credit ratings by showcasing the true asset base of our nations. The Congo Basin, for example, has carbon stock worth billions, yet it is not factored into the global financial system. This is the heart of our conversation today. How can we ensure that Africa's ecosystems, services from carbon sequestration to pollution control are valued as global public goods. We must seize this moment to commit to a revaluation of our GDP by integrating natural capital into our national accounting systems. This will not only provide the world with a more accurate representation of Africa's true wealth, but also help raise resources through initiatives like the Green Bond Market, mobilizing financing, employment, and sustainability. Africa must transition from being seen as an age-dependent continent to a partner of equal standing to the global world. We are involved in critical minerals, renewable energy resources, and the young dynamic workforce, all of which position us as key players in the transition to a green global economy. Our message to the world is clear. Africa is ready and capable, and the engagement with Africa must shift from donor-recipient dynamics to partner-to-partner cooperation. As leaders, we must invest in the local valuation of our natural resources to stimulate job creation, innovation, and sustainable development. This is not just an African agenda, it's a global one. We call on our partners, both within and outside Africa, to join us in creating a new economic paradigm that places nature at the center of our development strategy. Your Excellency, ladies and gentlemen, today's discussions will pave the way for a new era of economic productivity, one that recognizes and rewards the vital role Africa plays in supporting global environment. Let us leave here with clear commitments to revalue our natural capital, ensure that our ecosystems serve as engines of growth, and advocate for fair financial systems that reflect the true worth of our nations. I thank you.
Thank you, President Ruto, ably represented by His Excellency, Mr. Musalia, for very insightful reflections. It is now my pleasure to invite the co-chair of this meeting, Dr. Adesina. Okay, we're going to have a slight change of order here. I stand corrected. At this point, we are going to call to the podium one of Africa's leading champions on valuing Africa's green wealth, His Excellency President Paul Kagame of Rwanda. Please give him a warm welcome.
Denis, Sassou, President of the Republic of Congo, Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, Dr. Akinwumi, Adesina, President of the African Development Bank, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I will be very brief. First of all, I want to thank President Sassou, President Ruto, and Dr. Adesina for convening this important meeting. Building on the session we had in Addis in February this year. As we gather at COP29, Africa has one mission: to reaffirm our position as a key player in the fight against climate change. Unfortunately, insufficient access to climate finance remains Africa's biggest obstacle. Pledges made at previous summits have gone unfulfilled without accountability. This is not acceptable. continues to provide crucial ecosystem services in the world, such as sequestration and retention of carbon. Yet, the true value of these actions is not measured. Our continent is the leading source of global emissions, and therefore for the climate crisis. Being fairly compensated for our extensive contributions to climate solutions is not too much to ask. I therefore fully support the bold agenda to more accurately measure our continent's natural capital assets. This exercise makes clear that we are not asking for handouts, but rather for the world to pay for something that has tremendous value for all of us. In the long run, this means less debt and more fiscal space to finance our development. The moral of the story is that Africa should know the worth of our resources. By protecting and conserving the environment, we can reinvest the profits in our communities and our future. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, President Paul Kagame. We're not asking for handouts or for global partners to pay further for what has tremendous value. We now call on His Excellency, Mr. Emerson Mnangagwa, President of Zimbabwe, to make his comments. His Excellency that he will defer to his colleague presidents here for their statements. I will now call on His Excellency, Mr. Fauri Ezezima Nazigwe, the President of the Republic of Togo, to provide comments. Okay. All right. We are going to again move ahead very, very quickly. At this point, I'd like to ask that His Excellency, Mr. Tiémoko Meyliet Koné, the Vice President of the Republic of Côte d'Ivoire, to provide comments. Over to you, Your Excellency. You are on, Your Excellency. Microphone, sir.
Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, Monsieur le Président de la Banque africaine de développement, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs, je voudrais, au nom de Son Excellence M. Hassan, Président de la République de Côte d'Ivoire, remercier le Président Denis, Sassou, Nguesso et Obiang, ainsi que le président de la Banque africaine de développement, M. Adesina, pour la pertinence de la thématique qui nous réunit aujourd'hui. Cette thématique s'impose à notre continent en ce moment bien particulier où le monde peine à s'accorder sur un niveau de ressources climatiques à la hauteur des besoins d'adaptation de l'Afrique aux effets des changements climatiques. Je voudrais saluer le travail remarquable accompli par la DAC ainsi que par l'ensemble des partenaires et des États pour changer de regard et surtout donner à la richesse verte de l'Afrique sa juste valeur. En effet, il est impératif de reconnaître que le capital vert, en tant que bien, doit être reflété dans le produit intérieur brut, le PIB, afin de mesurer plus précisément cette richesse et de la prendre en charge dans le développement économique. Par ailleurs, je dois souligner que cette richesse est incontournable dans la résolution de la crise climatique mondiale. Pourtant, elle est souvent sous-évaluée, réduite à des chiffres qui ne reflètent ni sa valeur réelle, ni son rôle essentiel dans l'équilibre de notre planète. Aujourd'hui, il est primordial de repenser cette approche pour intégrer pleinement notre capital naturel dans nos modèles économiques en tant que pilier du développement durable. La Côte d'Ivoire soutient cette vision et s'engage à promouvoir la valorisation de ce capital. Cependant, nous devons approfondir la réflexion pour nous assurer que l'intégration de cette richesse ne soit pas qu'un simple exercice statistique, mais qu'elle génère réellement des revenus effectifs. Elle doit impacter l'essor économique et profiter aux populations en améliorant leurs conditions de vie, notamment celles des jeunes et des femmes. Pour ce faire, nous devons élaborer des stratégies.
Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. I really appreciate you being here despite a very tight schedule at this meeting. Your Excellency, President Sassou, Nguesso, President of the Republic of Congo, Your Excellency, Heads of States and Governments, Your Excellencies, Vice Presidents, Prime Ministers, Honorable Ministers, Your Excellencies, Heads of Delegations, esteemed ladies and gentlemen and delegates. I'd like to start by just thanking you all for taking time to be here today for the Heads of State high-level dialogue on measuring the green wealth of Africa. I would like to also thank all the Excellencies, Heads of State and Governments, the Vice Presidents, the Prime Ministers, the Honorable Ministers, that have given their statements of tremendous support to this particular initiative. Your being here means a lot for Africa, for Africa's voice to be clearly heard. I'd like to applaud His Excellency President Sassou Nguesso, President of the Republic of Congo, and President William Ruto of Kenya, both co-chairs, for their leadership of this agenda and for joining me in our collective drive to assure that Africa's natural resources are considered in the valuation of Africa's wealth, what I call green GDP for Africa. Africa has some of the largest sources of natural capital in the world, including over 40% of the world's clean energy potential, 65% of the world's uncultivated arid land, 25% of global biodiversity, and 20% of the world's tropical rainforest area. The Congo Basin, which you have heard quite a lot about today, is the second largest carbon lung in the world, as you heard from the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs for Equatorial Guinea, after the Amazon forest. It stretches 314 million hectares with 1.2 million kilometers of primary forest. The peatlands of the Congo Basin store 29 billion tons of carbon. That is the equivalent of 3 years' worth of global greenhouse gas emissions. The Congo Basin also absorbs 1.5 billion tons of carbon dioxide per year. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa's forests account for 26% of all the carbon sequestration in forests in the world. The continent also hosts considerable non-renewable natural resources, accounting for 50% of the world reserves of cobalt used for batteries, 40% of manganese reserves used for solar and wind farms, and more than 80% of platinum reserves, complemented by rich endowments of nickel, copper, and rare earth minerals. These are absolutely crucial for global green energy transitions, for electric vehicles and battery energy storage systems. And the value of that today for the battery energy storage systems and electric vehicles is $7 trillion by 2030. And that's going to rise to $58 trillion by 2050. Imagine that cannot happen without Africa. Africa also is endowed with abundant renewable energy, an almost limitless supply of potential solar capacity of 10 terawatts, hydro 350 megawatts, wind 110 gigawatts, geothermal resources 15 gigawatts, all of which are the backbone of a less carbon intensive and more sustainable global energy system. Therefore, while Africa contributes significantly to global public good for tackling climate change with its vast resources of natural capital, its vast natural capital has continued to be significantly undervalued. This vast natural capital is not taken into consideration in valuing the GDP of African economies. For example, while the GDP of Africa was estimated at $2.5 trillion in 2018, this was 2.5 times lower than the estimated value of its natural capital, estimated at the time at $2.6 trillion. Sparkly includes some valuation of the ecosystem services. This situation, Your Excellencies, makes Africa to be green endowed, but cash poor. Green endowed, but cash poor. When the value of Africa's vast forests and environmental services and natural capital are properly valued, the size of its rebased GDP, taking this into account, will be much higher. The African Development Bank's preliminary estimates, based on very conservative, I must say, assumptions today, show that Africa's nominal GDP in 2022 could have increased by $66.1 billion when adjusted for carbon sequestration only. Carbon sequestration only. Now, Your Excellencies, that is more than the combined GDP of 42 African countries. The proper valuation of Africa's green GDP is where the trillions of dollars for the continent will come from, based on proper valuation, which come from to boost the wealth and the financing of the country. The greening of the GDP will also have other benefits, including development of carbon markets in Africa, which many of you have mentioned. Unfortunately, Excellencies, today, several African countries are giving away their vast amounts of land for carbon credits. While this may generate some short-term financing, it needs to be well understood that Africa is a carbon price taker and therefore is short-changed. While the price of carbon in Europe is high and could be as high as $200 per ton because of the strict EU emission trading standards, the carbon price in Africa is as low as $3, and when you're actually lucky, you can be as high as $10. The widespread sales of vast areas of Africa's lands that are rich in carbon, what I call carbon grab, has 5 major consequences, which we must understand. First, the countries are being paid nothing. They are being underpaid for the carbon due to the undervaluation of Africa's carbon sinks. Second, the sequestered carbon on the lands can no longer be used as part of the nation's nationally determined contributions. Third, the countries lose sovereignty over their own lands. Fourth, the carbon sequestered over these lands and forests can no longer be used to rebase and to revalue the green GDP of those countries, which is what we are talking about today. And fifth, based on what I just said, the ongoing carbon grab in Africa is a lose, lose, lose proposition. The proper valuation of Africa's green wealth will increase its access to financial flows, in part because credit agencies, rating agencies, will be able to incorporate the true value of the overall asset class, which in turn could improve the country's risk profiles. Therefore, Your Excellencies, it is time for Africa's green environmental assets to be properly priced to allow the continent to turn its massive green assets into wealth through their inclusion in the green GDP for Africa. These will raise massive financial resources for the continent, spur greater green investments, and provide better policies for the greening of African economies for sustainable development. The significantly higher revenues that Africa will generate for the proper valuation of its carbon sinks and environmental services will allow it to be able to service its debt, do so sustainably while remaining green. Your Excellencies, it is time for Africa's green wealth to be properly measured. It is time to take Africa's natural capital into consideration in the estimation of its GDP. It is time for Africa to be green rich and cash rich. Your Excellencies, I am delighted to inform you that the African Development Bank has taken leadership on this particular issue. We have produced a report that is actually called Measuring the Green Wealth of Nations, Natural Capital and Economic Productivity in Africa, which is right on your desk, right in front of you. This report sets out key actions that we are going to take collectively as Africa to value and to integrate natural capital into the measure of Africa's GDP. Your Excellencies, this is a defining moment for Africa. It's an inflection point.
Acknowledging Prime Cabinet Secretary Mudavadi here, I'm also the proud Chancellor of the University of Nairobi. We have 50,000 students, and right now, I don't know how many of them are really prepared for the world of work. Captains of industry tell me most of them are not. So we have to revolutionize education, making it fit for purpose for the world of work, and that's precisely what President Ruto is doing in Kenya. Africa's other most unique and significant resource, nature. Africa's natural capital, as you know, as many speakers have said, surpasses that of any other continent. The good thing is this: Africa's natural capital is still almost entirely intact. And that's very different from the part of the world where I'm from, in Europe, or in Asia, or in fact, much of the rest of the world. And this reality presents two very unique opportunities. One, a huge driver of growth. Africa can not only lean on nature to fuel growth, tourism, energy, agriculture, minerals, but by valuing nature, it also adds huge resources to Africa's balance sheet, but only if it is accounted for. Two, Africa can reinvent the relationship between nature and the economy. In the West, we simply depleted our natural capital. We drew it all down, largely gone. So the question is this: is this a classic zero-sum case? Or is Africa ready and prepared to leapfrog over those mistakes in the West? By valuing natural capital properly, it means to protect, to utilize smartly, and to keep nature as a source to fuel Africa's economy, not only of today, but also of tomorrow. A fuel you cannot completely draw down, a fuel which, quite frankly, is renewable. A fuel that will yield a triple dividend: growth, jobs, prosperity. But excellencies, as we're here in Baku at COP29, let us also acknowledge the elephant in the room, the US election. And let us remind ourselves there are no red states or blue states, there are only resilient states or risky states. So the question is this: will African nations be risky, or will they be resilient and prosper? Nature, and more importantly, valuing nature, is the key to unlock resilience across the continent. And allow me, Victor, allow me a final word to address to you, my big brother, Adesina. Dr. Adesina, this is your last COP in your role as President of the African Development Bank. And since you took office, Africa's development truly surpassed all expectations. And if I, as Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, were to grade you, I would not only grade you as an A, I would grade you as a triple A. And you launched, sir, the largest resilient economy program in the world, the Africa Adaptations Acceleration Program. So you and the fellow African leaders here in this room and outside this room, you are a beacon of hope for the world. Africa, leading on building resilient economy. With that, Africa unstoppable. I thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Professor Patrick Verkuyt, CEO of the Global Center on Adaptation, in your very inimitable way and passionate way, making the case for making the wealth of human capital and education fit for purpose on the continent and transforming green resources into green wealth, as well as turning risks into resilience. And thank you very much for the acknowledgement of Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, AAA, for which the African Adaptation Acceleration.
The African heads of state have just made a very strong joint communique in respect of COP29 here in Azerbaijan. HICGI News Agency has been privileged to cover this plenary of heads of state from Africa, making a very clear statement. They have said that Africa does not need handouts. Africa has financial assets in terms of resources that it can use and can also pursue all its agenda. The several measures, as according to His Excellency Mr. Denis Sassou, Nguesso, the President of the Republic of Congo, who has welcomed counterparts and other participants for the meeting of his opening remarks. There's also been His Excellency William Ruto being represented by the Cabinet Secretary and as well President Paul Kagame. I've seen Zimbabwe, I've seen several heads of states from Africa, as well as the President of the Africa Development Bank, Mr. Dr. Akinwumi Adesina. HICGI News Agency will continue to bring you what's transpiring here in Azerbaijan at COP29 of the United Nations from a convention on climate change. My name is Kivumbi Earnest Benjamin.